All right. Thanks for tuning into more NASCAR coverage on Prime Sports NASCAR. Eric Smith from racereviewonline.net has the week off again. He gets a week off and then he decides I'm taking another week off. Who's he think he is? Somebody who doesn't get paid? He doesn't get paid.
Well, he does have the benefit of being at Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
He does
today for the test, so I guess that's a good excuse.
We could be so lucky.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was also wasn't he at the Final Four?
I don't know. I didn't know about that.
I think he was. I think he mentioned it in one of his tweets. And I was like, well, he is in Indianapolis.
That's true.
And I know when Gonzaga made that big shot to get to the championship game, you could see about 7 or 8 actual living fans in the stands. So I was wondering if Eric was one of the guys they actually let in.
Sitting amongst the cutouts.
Cutouts, yeah. So even at this point in the year, they're still with the cutouts. Anyway, so I'll tell you what, let's wrap up last week, CJ, because there were some. Look, we were all anticipating the dirt race, and it was kind of cool to see how that went, and it was different. What didn't work out was there just wasn't any movement at the front, none, zero, and it just was a matter of who was going to have the better car. In that, like Suarez actually looked pretty good for like that middle point. And then Logano just took over at the end point, and that was it. It just, I'm sorry, it just wasn't a very exciting race as far as that was concerned.
No, I completely agree with you. It was interesting to watch them do it, but exactly like you said, it was very processional. I thought the only people that were able to move through the field were Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell. They started at the back, and that was ultimately their downfall. They got caught up in other people's mistakes, and they weren't
two favorites. Bang.
Yeah. Exactly right. So, and actually it was Chris Bell's mistake, right? That put him out. He was the one that lost control in the corner and went up. Once those guys had the damage and lost ground, even Kyle Busch. I mean, Kyle Busch was able to work his way a little bit forward, not as much as those two guys. But then he ultimately had a problem and had to go for an unscheduled stop as well. And that was basically the end of it. So I think heading into the dirt race next year, it's going to be 100% a track position game. And it's going to be all about getting through those heat races if they're actually able to have them next year, to be able to have the top qualifying spot and then just avoid damage after that. Because if you're able to do it and not burn off your tires, then chances are good that you're going to finish where you start.
Yeah, look, I don't have any problem at all if they want to have with this, and they're going to do it. They want to have a dirt race a year. I'm okay with that. The thing I just don't like is you're taking away a Bristol race.
Yeah,
that's the bummer. Like, here you got one of the best racetracks in the entire series, and why don't you take the freaking Pocono race away?
Yeah, I would like to see 2 Bristol races actually on the concrete. It's a fantastic track, and the speeds that they get. I mean, that's the allure of Bristol, right?
Yes.
It's the high, very fast speeds on a very small track, and you lose all the speed, you lose all of that luster when you move to the dirt. And I give NASCAR a lot of credit for trying something new. I think in general it worked because it was a novelty, but how to figure out how to make the actual racing more exciting, and having the guys like Christopher Bell and Larson out first crash, that makes it really hard to produce an exciting race on that surface.
Yeah, let's see. Truex was the one who led early. He led 126 laps. Then it was Suarez who led 58 laps, and then Logano led 61, and that was it. Yes,
was it.
Really only had 3 drivers who ran significant laps. That was it. And Suarez finished 4th, Newman 5th, Reddick 7th, and Jones 9th. So we did get a little bit of parity in the top 10. And we did talk about Suarez in the last show. And good for him. I mean, I'd like to see this continue. I'm actually a little bit surprised neither one of you guys have decided, hey, I'll go take Suarez on my fantasy team. I was actually thinking about that, but I've moved around so much that I think I'm actually in a pretty good spot right now. So I'm like, I think I've done what I needed to do for at least a few weeks with my fantasy team, the bottom end of my fantasy team. So yeah, maybe we'll see what happens with Suarez. As long as I'm in last place each week, I'll still get an opportunity to grab him first if I want him. But good story, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, I think that was great for him and the new team to have the success. That was the first time that week, I should say, was his first time ever on dirt and racing on dirt. So that tells you what the team is capable of when the conditions are fair for everyone and they're not getting outspent and outdeveloped. So I think that bodes well for that team's development in the future and their ability to be able to come to the fore at tracks that are a little bit more competitive and not all about just those extra hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars that you can pump into car development. Yeah. I think when you get to the tracks, the short tracks, Bristol, Martinsville, maybe a Richmond, and then certainly the restrictor plate tracks, I think that's a spot where fantasy players and anybody looking for long shots should be able to start looking at Suarez, certainly in the second half of the year as this team gains more notes from just visiting the tracks through the first part of the season.
He's 20th in points. He's leading Bubba Wallace. Mm-hmm. He's leading Cole Custer, leading Tyler Reddick, Chase Briscoe, Aric Almirola. Boy, Aric Almirola is in big trouble. 28th, and he's not, I mean, he has one top 15 on the season.
And then you see this week he's starting at 31st.
Yeah.
Martinsville. Yeah, they've got a real big hole to dig out of really quickly here if they want something to happen. It's been a horrible start to the season for him. It looks like it's going to be more salt in the wound this weekend with the 31st place starting position. They've got to figure out what's happening. I hesitate to speculate what his future would be, but I think we've said it quite a few times that he needs to get it done this year. He needs to start proving that he is a regular race winner, at least once or twice every year, not just out of a fluke. And if he's not able to do that and advance, and then from there advance in the playoffs, then he's probably not going to be around for much longer.
And we talked about this with Harvick. I mean, he's got Briscoe, he's got Custer, and he's got Almirola. And I'm sorry, but that's just no coincidence that Harvick has been struggling so far this season compared to years past.
Yeah, we talked about that in the preseason as well, how much of an impact his teammates were going to have on him this year, given that he lost Boyer. I think we're seeing that as well. And he had such a strong season last year to then come out of the gate. It's same as, I mean, it's interesting at this point in the year, we've got 7 different winners from the first 7 races. And if you would have told me that 2 Hendrick guys would be up there with wins, I wouldn't have picked probably the 2 that you got. I would have put Chase Elliott in there. And then prior to the week, Ryan Blaney, the only one of the Penske drivers that has a win yet, and still no Kyle Busch, still no Denny Hamlin. So it's very interesting the way that this season's starting to play out. And I think we cannot at this point discount the impact to Harvick that his change in teammates has had on him.
Yeah, and then Logano made it 2 Penske drivers with his win at Bristol, which, by the way, happens to be Eric's driver on his fantasy team, which gave him the first winning fantasy week of the season. So even though Eric had a win earlier this year, he still didn't win that week, which is, you're getting 100 points on a winner. That's real hard to not win the week when your driver wins. But Eric's team found a way to lose the week when he won that week. But anyway, that's his first winning week, and he picked up a lot on you, 130 points in 1 week on you, Eric, CJ. So that was because you have Larson and definitely expected a lot more. And also had Truex, who gobbled up a lot of points, but still finished 19th when it was all said and done. So
the fantasy results did not bother me this week. The fact that Eric had Logano in his wagers was what bothered me.
What, his picks? Yeah.
Yes. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah. Well, he had Logano and Keselowski. I took Keselowski. Of course, I didn't take Logano. Yep. I just figured because Keselowski had a little bit better of a history at Bristol too, and I just figured maybe that would have something to do with it, but it didn't. And Eric wound up hitting, which was good for us that we had somebody that got the pick right, because Logano was what? He was about 30-1 or something like that, or 25-1, or.
He was way down there. He was definitely not in the 10s.
Yeah.
And I did not have high expectations for him too. And then similar for, I don't know if you watched the truck race before it, but Truex hadn't been in a truck for how many years? It might have even been more than a decade, and just came out and dominated.
Yes.
And he's not a dirt racer, he's not a truck racer, but my goodness, did he just clean up on that truck race. That was an incredible performance from him, and then he parlayed it right into the Cup race, leading 126 laps right out of the gate too.
And then after that, it was all over. And then all his momentum was shot. Martinsville, one of the 3 short track racetracks, taking a look at Eric's track trends, definitely favors Joe Gibbs and Penske. Also, and this is going to be important if you're watching the race live, and you can wager live in NASCAR now. So if you're watching live after the first stage, you want to be in the top 5. So if you're in the top 5 after the first stage, then you're going to win the race, because since they've had this format the last 4 years, and I guess maybe Martinsville has probably had 2 each. So is that 8 races maybe in the 4 years?
Correct. Yep.
All 8 winners finished in the top 5 in the first stage. So keep that in mind. You might want to just, if there's a driver you didn't take that finished in the top 5 that looks pretty good early, you might want to go, the odds aren't all that bad. I'll throw a few bucks there. And 10 of the last 11 winners started in the top 10, which makes sense with the first stage trend. So you want to start up front at Martinsville. And that definitely had a lot to do with my wagers this week. And you mentioned 7 different winners this year, 10 if you count the Daytona Clash and the duels.
That's true.
So it's crazy. And I look, that's the way I wagered my picks on this week. I went mostly, if not all, with drivers who had not won yet. I figured, let's just go for this until it ends. And I'm just going to keep throwing money on drivers that have not won in this, this year yet.
Well, looking inside the top 10 for the starting position, and Martinsville very much is a track position track. So the non-winners so far this year starting in the top 10 here, you got Denny Hamlin, you've got Chase Elliott, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Ryan Newman, Kevin Harvick, and Brad Keselowski. So those are some pretty good choices right in there, and all of them certainly have performed well at Martinsville in the past. But the track trends highlight the fact of how much of a track position track this is. There's really only one lane. You want to be down on the bottom. If you get stuck on the outside, you are screwed and you are going to the back. You've got to find a hole to get in, and it's only by somebody's graciousness that you're going to get in. If you're on the bottom and you got somebody close on your bumper, they're not going to be afraid to tap you and move you up the track and get underneath you. And I think every time you see restart, you're going to see, without a doubt, the leader is going to be taking the bottom. I don't think there's any choose cone drama that's going to be going on this week. You're going to want to be starting on the inside every single restart that comes. And generally speaking, you get more than 10 cautions each race here at Martinsville. It's generally a pretty high caution race.
All right. So there were only 2 drivers that all 3 of us picked this week. 2, which is actually pretty high for us.
Yes.
The one is Denny Hamlin. We all picked Denny Hamlin at 7-1 as my top pick. And the other one was, and it's not one of the top guys.
I'm trying to remember your choices. Was it it was not one of the top guys then.
Either it's 20-1 or higher, which is, I don't think we've ever done before. We've all picked the same long shot.
Why can't I think right now? I'm looking at the names and I'm trying to remember. Who would it be?
He's in the playoffs right now.
Yes. Is it? Did we choose Byron? No. I know who it is. A teammate. Byron's teammate, Alex Bowman.
Yes. Alex Bowman at 25-1.
Yes.
Who was 6th in both races last year, and is starting to pick things up a little bit, including that 3rd at Atlanta. So maybe that would That's the look. It is a long shot, especially considering he's starting 20th.
It is, but like you said, he's been picking it up. He started 8th and 3rd in the 2 races last year, finished 6th in both of those. And like you said, through this year so far, he started to find a little bit of traction. And I just thought it was odd what was missing in the first couple of races, because the only thing that changed from his entire team is the number on the car and the paint job. All the other, every other piece is still in place for him. He should have been the one, in addition to Elliott, that right out of the gate should have been, hitting on all cylinders. Byron had changes, etc. But Bowman's seemed to have found a little bit of stability with 2 6th-place finishes. I think this will be a good week for him, and you never know what happens on those restarts as long as he's choosing the inside line.
Yeah. The only other long shot that Eric took was Byron. And I would have taken Byron at 20-1 starting 3rd, because he's got 5 straight top 10s on the season. He's got the win. In his last 3 races at this track, he crashed 8th and 2nd. So that tells me, okay, if he doesn't crash, he's a top 10 driver at this racetrack. The only reason I didn't take him is because he's already won. That's it. And he's William Byron. So it's like, William Byron win 2 races in 8 to start the season? I mean, I can't think about that. But I think he's a solid long shot at 20-1, considering he's starting 3rd.
He hasn't finished outside the top 10 since his win either. It's been a pretty remarkable run of 5 races for him on dirt as well, with a 6th-place finish. And he won in Miami from the 31st spot. So with a 3rd-place spot here at Martinsville, where track position is everything, as long as he doesn't make a mistake on pit road, as long as he doesn't get caught up in somebody's damage and have a crash and finish 35th, I think he's definitely going to be one that's certainly in the top 5 at the end of the first stage. I would expect him to be in the top 5 at the end of the first stage, though, to be honest with you.
And then he's a contender.
Yep. So, exactly right.
My long shots, I also went with Di Benedetto, Suarez, Buescher, and Stenhouse. Di Benedetto does not have a good starting position, but he finished in the top 10 in both races last year, and also has been doing a lot better with 4 straight top 20s, and he's starting to pick things up. Also, Suarez. I mean, how can I not put some money on Suarez? The way he's going, he starts 11th, and he's got 2 top 10s on the racetrack in his career. Buescher, I just like the way he's had some moments the last few races where he's kind of been around. And then also Stenhouse is the easy one. I have no idea. Now, I would think that the odds changed dramatically after the qualifying came out, but 150-1. Come on. I mean, the guy will start 6th. He does have a couple of top 10s here, and he's been 13th or better in his last 5 races.
Yeah, Stenhouse was definitely one that I considered. This is a track where he always outperforms. When I looked at where he was from a starting position, I mean, he was guaranteed to be in a fantasy roster. But then when I looked at where he was starting, given the finish differential points that typically go into a lot of the fantasy races, I was a little bit hesitant to be as optimistic with him as I would. But I think from a wagering standpoint, he's a really good option, because like you said, he's been outperforming at this track. He's got 2 top 10s at Martinsville in the past as well. A really good starting position, coming off of some momentum last week, and he's had some really good races early in this season. So he's with this team that he's overperforming considering the other drivers that have been in the car before him. So I think he's a really good choice. For Buescher, I want to see both him and Newman have speed at a different track, a non 1.5 mile oval, fast oval. I'd like to see them have some speed this weekend at Martinsville. If they're able to run up front in the top 10 and be able to make some passes and show that they can be up there, I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic on them for the rest of the season. Having said that, though, when they go to Charlotte, when they go to Texas, when they go to Atlanta, when they go to Kansas, all those places, you have to look at Buescher and you have to look at Newman. I'm just questioning whether that organization short track speed is there right now. Newman got a top 10 last week, but that was on dirt. We'll see what they're able to do on the actual surface this week.
And get this, there is only one other driver other than Ricky Stenhouse who has not finished 20th or worse in one race this season. So Ricky Stenhouse and the points leader, Denny Hamlin, are the only two drivers that do not have a 19th or a 20th result or worse on their ledger this year. That's crazy.
That's why he's 14th in points in the playoff standings, right?
Yeah, it is.
He's ahead of Kurt Busch. He's ahead of Alex Bowman. He's ahead of Almirola.
Oh, yeah, Almirola, yeah. He's ahead of Bowman and Busch and Kurt Busch,
almost 10 races into the season, you'd expect Kurt Busch to be in the top 10, if not top 20. Same thing with Almirola. I mean, you wouldn't expect him to be necessarily top 10, but you'd expect him to certainly be within playoff contention almost 10 races into the season. Now you'd expect Stenhouse to maybe be on the bubble, maybe be 17th, 18th, trying to find his way in, depending upon who slips, given how many different winners we've had so far. But he's solidly in there at 14th, and he's not far behind Kyle Busch in 13th. He's only 3 points behind him, and 6 points behind Dillon in 12th. So Stenhouse is having a really good season and definitely outperforming, like I said, probably any other driver that's been in that car before him.
Yeah, he needs to take advantage of his starting position this week. He has to, another top 10, something like that, if he's going to be a real serious contender. Okay, as far as our top picks, now you and Eric went ahead and both put most of your money on Truex at 5-1. He's the defending champ. He's won twice in the last 3 races at Martinsville, leading a combined 725 laps in those 3 races. That's domination. So I could see exactly why you guys are going with Truex. And the other driver that the other 2 drivers that you guys have agreed on with Joey Logano at 7-1 and Ryan Blaney at 8-1.
Yeah, not surprising with Truex. He's actually got 4 races here at Martinsville where he's led over 100 laps. 2 wins, back-to-back wins, one of them being this race last year. It started on the front row in the fall race here as well, but ended up finishing 22nd after leading 129 laps. So fully expect him to come out of the gate and be able to lead a ton of laps again. He's starting 7th. So definitely one that, I think if we had qualifying and it were a normal season, Truex would probably be more like 2, 3, maybe 4-1. So to be able to take him at 5-1, I thought that was a pretty good deal. Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney both looking extremely racy. I want to see a little bit more from Keselowski before I start putting Keselowski into that same group. But Logano came in here and led 234 laps. In this race last year, and he's another guy that's got 4 races on his Martinsville career where he's led 100 or more laps. Just has the 1 win, though, interestingly enough, despite being able to do that. And then Blaney, 34 laps, 36 laps. He's only got 1 race out of his 10 Martinsville starts where he led over 100 laps, did not win that, has not won at the track, but back-to-back top 2 finishes, runner-up finishes at this track last year. So he's, without a doubt, with a win under his belt, he's going to be, and plus having a very damaged car at the end of last week or 2 weeks on the dirt. I think he's going to be hungry for more success, and he's going to be up there at the front fighting for the win.
Yeah, I didn't take any of those 3 drivers because they've all won this year.
Yep.
Instead, I put a lot of my money on Keselowski, who has yet to win, and who has 10 straight top 10s at Martinsville. 9 of those are top 5s. I mean, that is an amazing run. He's got a runner-up in there. He's got 2 wins. He led 446 laps in his 2019 win. He also won in 2017, so he's got a little, maybe he's got a little every other year streak trend going. If that happens, he'll win one of the races this year. He's only led 8 laps in his last 3 races, though, at Martinsville. That does concern me. But he was 3rd and 4th last year. And the last 2 Cup winners, Blaney, Logano. Can Penske make it 3 straight separate winners? He'll start 10th. So I went ahead with Keselowski at 6-1. You went with Elliott. You're the only one to go with Chase Elliott at 6-1. He has pretty good record here. He's got 4 top 5s in 8 races, including a runner-up, and his impressive 236 lap win last November.
Yeah, Elliott was kind of a no-brainer for me because of how close he's been at this track. I mean, aside from the 36th place finish in the fall of 2019, he's got 5 straight top 10 finishes, throwing out the 36th place out of 6. 5th and 1st last year, with last year's fall win being pretty dominant with 236 laps led. He led 123 and finished 3rd in the fall race of 2017. Was 2nd in this race in 2019 with 49 laps led. Starting to find a little bit of traction. Got some teammates that are in victory lane so far, have been able to get the job done and get their tickets stamped into the playoffs. I think he wants one as well. He's 5th place in terms of the starting positions, right alongside Ricky Stenhouse Jr., right behind William Byron, teammate. So he'll be on the inside, assuming nobody drops to the back. I think Elliott with a 5th place spot and some struggles and an off week to be able to kind of assess where he's at should be in store for a pretty good week. We'll see.
Yeah, Elliott's the one guy that I tried to get in there because he hasn't won this year. But I just didn't have enough. Denny Hamlin, though, again, he's the one that we've all agreed upon. He'll start 2nd, so I guess he's got to find a way to quickly dive underneath. But he's got 6 top 5s this season in 7 races. He also has finished in the top 5 50% of the time at this racetrack in 30 races with 5 wins. The only thing I was worried about with Hamlin is he didn't fare very well last year here. And he's only and even though he's won 5 times, he's only won once in his last 19 races at Martinsville. But he's 7-1, and he's the hottest driver this season without a win.
Exactly right. I went for him mainly because of what he's been doing this season, more so than his performance last year. I think his performance last year at Martinsville was definitely suspect. 3 laps down in 24th place in this race, and then an 11th place in the fall race, despite leading 42 laps. But he does have 5 wins. He is the hottest driver in the series right now without a victory. Arguably the hottest driver in the series, period. He's the only driver in the point standing that's over 300 points. The next closest is Joey Logano at 269. Hamlin's got 327, and there's only 1 race that he hasn't finished in the top 5 yet.
This may be bad news for him because he's maybe a little bit too hot too early.
Too hot too early from a championship standpoint. Yeah, that might be bad news. But I think if you're looking specifically at this week, coming to a track where he's been very good at in the past and maybe underperformed last year, it might be time for a breakout.
We hope so. Kyle Larson, you went ahead and grabbed Larson. You're the only one who did that. I was surprised. This is not a good track for Kyle Larson, and he starts 19th.
Exactly right. And this was, again, similar to Hamlin, much a result of how quickly he's been performing well in new surroundings this year as well. He's been fast pretty much every single time out, regardless of being in Hendrick organization for the first time and seeing these tracks for the first time in Hendrick equipment. I knew he would be, or I thought he would be a championship contender, just given the fact that this was the best equipment that he'd ever been in. He's proved it right out of the gate, and with 5 top 10 finishes from 7 races, and obviously, he had the accident last week on the dirt, would have been one certainly that probably would have been up there and dominated. I'm interested to see what he can do on tracks that haven't been as kind to him in the past, and I think Martinsville is one of those places where he can put the equipment to the test and really show us what he's got, whereas he may not have been able to do that in the past with Chip Ganassi equipment.
I was just thinking about that. If Daytona can have 3 races, which we hope they don't have 3 races next year. But if Daytona could have 3 races, then why can't Bristol?
They should. If there's a track that should have 3 races, it should be Bristol, period. That's everybody's favorite track every year.
Kyle Busch is the, Eric and I put a little bit of money on Kyle, basically kind of just hedging our bet with him. Another driver who hasn't won yet. 9 top 10s in his last 11 races at Martinsville with 8 top 5s, 2 runner-ups, and 2 wins. So he's been pretty impressive at this track. The only thing that for me, it was more of just covering my bases since he hasn't won yet, and he's got a good history here recently. But I'm not very confident with Kyle Busch right now. Even though he has a couple of top fives in his last 4 races, it's still he's not. He hasn't shown a whole lot yet. He's not dominating. He's not even putting any spurts together where he's looking like, oh, he's going to win this race. I don't think he's done that at all this year.
Aside from the 7 laps that he led at Bristol on the dirt, he had only led 1 lap up until that point this season. That was in the Clash.
Than I thought.
It was preseason. So plus, if you look at his results, just extremely inconsistent. 14th, 35th, 10th, 3rd, 25th, 5th, 17th. So maybe this is an up week given that trend for Martinsville. But again, I don't think it'll be any higher than a top 5. He just, like you said, he has not had the speed. He's been inconsistent. I wonder if pressure like last season is starting to creep into his mind and he's starting to have doubts again. And maybe we see another long drawn out season waiting for him to get his first win. But normally, like this time last year, I would have covered my bets and I would have put some on him, certainly because of his history at this track. But at this point, after a year and almost a quarter of the same Kyle Busch that we saw last year, I don't feel like I need to at this point. And I don't blame you for. But I just didn't see the consistency from the results so far this year that would make me feel like I have to do that.
And in closing, if anybody wants to know why Kevin Harvick is 14-1, doesn't really have a whole lot to do with what he's doing this year. He has not led a lap in his last 9 races at Martinsville. That's right, no laps led last 9 races at Martinsville. And only 5 top 5s in 39 attempts. Does have a win, just 1, and he will start 9th at 14-1. None of us
and that win
took him
10 years ago since he's won at this track. Almost 20 races at this point. And we were talking about drivers that have dominated at Martinsville, Martin Truex certainly being one of them, Elliott leading over 100 laps, Logano leading over 100 laps 4 or 5 times. Harvick, who you typically think of as a driver that is dominant at a lot of tracks, he's only led over 100 laps at Martinsville twice. He's only got 1 win out of 39 starts, 15th and 17th in these 2 visits last year. You got to go back to 2017, 2018 to the last time he had top 5s at Martinsville. So also with the downturn or dip in performance so far this season, he's another one that, you would have expected to come in a little bit higher, maybe 4-1, if he were performing earlier this season, but certainly coming into this weekend, another one that I don't feel like I need to cover off on, to be honest with you.
Even at 14-1, it's like, that's okay.
Yep.
Why would you do it? I mean, it would have to be some sort of very fortunate, lucky something for Kevin Harvick to all of a sudden, you'd have to steal a race the way a long shot steals a race. That's about it.
Yeah, exactly right. That's he's performing this year too. He's going to have to steal a race. I mean, he's not terrible, and what he's done so far this season would be looked upon as most other teams as being a good season and a good start to the season. But after dominating and winning so many races last year and just being a dominant championship contender year in and year out, to start off the season without a win, 5 top 10s, only 2 top 5s out of 7 races so far this year. He's just lacking that spark, similar to Kyle Busch.
All right. So what's next week?
Next week, we've got Richmond. Yeah, so 3 short tracks right in a row, and then we go to Talladega.
Talladega coming up in a few weeks. And, of course, the Martinsville race is on Saturday night. So
Saturday night, first of the year, and the last night race until Charlotte. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's 2 months.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Okay. I don't know what that's about, but anyway. All right. So Saturday night racing next week. Hopefully Eric will be back with us talking about Richmond, the 3rd in 3 short track races before we head off to Talladega. What's going on with RotoWire? What do you got cooking for Saturday night's race?
Well, we'll have fantasy previews for both the Xfinity race Friday nights, and we'll also have a fantasy preview for the Cup race Saturday night. And then sometime on Sunday, we will have the NASCAR barometer up on rotowire.com with the race recap.
Sounds good. CJ, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for having me.